Imagine this. You're standing in front of a man who seems to have everything under control. His job, stable. His routine, structured. His relationships, functioning. From the outside, everything about him speaks of order, of achievement, of certainty. People admire him. He leads with clarity. He listens, nods, responds with measured logic. And yet, if you look closely, there's something untouched within him. A space that remains silent, uninvited. It's not coldness. It's not arrogance. It's simply protected. This man, like many, has built his life with discipline. He's learned to excel, to provide, to plan. But beneath that polished surface lies a world he's rarely, if ever, explored. A depth of emotion so carefully tucked away that even he doesn't realize it still waits, hidden, dormant, intact. And then she appears, not with fireworks, not with declarations, not with seduction. She arrives quietly. Maybe it was a glance across the room, a casual exchange, a simple kindness. Or maybe it was just her presence, the way she inhabited herself with such ease. A calm, grounded woman who wasn't looking for anything. Not validation, not attention, just being. And that changed everything. Something stirred within him. Something subtle but undeniable. A shift, not dramatic, not even visible. But inside, something started to crack open. Not because she did anything specific. Not because she chased or tried. But because of what she represented. She didn't touch his hand. She didn't make promises. She didn't even stay long. But somehow she reached a place in him that no one else had touched. And she did it without effort. Carl Jung once said that the human soul doesn't fall in love with the obvious. It falls in love with the symbolic. And that's what happened here. Because what she awakened in him wasn't about her as a person. It was about what she mirrored back to him. Parts of himself he had buried long ago. His own longing for depth. For softness. For authenticity. The kind of love that doesn't demand, but reflects. She didn't speak his language of logic. She spoke something deeper. The language of energy. Of vibration. She didn't try to be understood. She simply was. And that disarmed him more than any words ever could. He began to feel something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. Longing. A magnetic pull towards something he couldn't define. It wasn't lust. It wasn't romance in the conventional sense. It was recognition. His unconscious knew something his conscious mind couldn't explain. That's how it begins. Not with fireworks, but with resonance. And suddenly his structured world felt different. He may not have even shown it. Maybe he smiled the same way, worked the same hours, spoke with the same calm. But inside, the foundation had shifted. A quiet discomfort was growing. A question, a hunger. Why did she affect me like that? Why do I keep thinking about her? Why did something in me soften without my permission? He doesn't say this out loud. Most men won't. Because they don't have the framework for it. All they know is that something happened. And now the familiar isn't enough anymore. Not because she took something away, but because she revealed what was already missing. When a woman is at peace with herself, she becomes a mirror. One that the male soul instinctively recognizes. Even if he resists it. Because she doesn't demand. She doesn't chase. She doesn't try to fit into his life. She just exists, and that kind of energy confronts him with himself. She represents something he has longed for but didn't know how to name. Not the mother, not the lover, not the savior. Something beyond all roles. She becomes his anima. Jung described the anima as the man's inner feminine, the bridge to his unconscious, the symbolic representation of everything he has repressed or forgotten. And when he meets a woman who embodies that archetype without knowing it, his soul responds, immediately, without logic, without resistance. But here's the paradox. The more deeply he is moved, the more he might withdraw. Not because she did anything wrong, but because something inside him panics. The mask begins to slip. The armor feels heavy. And vulnerability, though beautiful, also feels like danger. So he distances himself. He becomes more rational. He retreats into the safe, the predictable. He returns to the version of himself that the world understands. And she's left wondering what happened. Why did he pull away when everything seemed so aligned? And the answer is this. It wasn't her. It was what she awakened. Because what moved in him wasn't small, it was tectonic. She didn't just enter his life, she entered his psyche. She stirred shadows he wasn't ready to face, and in that space confusion grows. Because the masculine is taught to control, to know, to conquer. But love, real soul-shaking love, can't be controlled. It can't be tamed. And when it comes from a woman who isn't trying to win him over, but who is simply grounded in her own truth, it disorients him. And yet, it stays with him. She stays with him. Not as a name or a face, but as a feeling. A vibration he can't forget. Like a melody that plays in the background of his thoughts. Like a light he can't stop seeking, even in his dreams. He may try to forget. He may move on. Find others. Distract himself. But deep inside he knows this wasn't ordinary. Because it wasn't just about her. It was about him. It was about the part of him that she reflected. The part that wants to feel, but has been too afraid. The part that longs to be truly seen, but hides behind strength and structure. And now, there's no going back. Because once the soul is touched, it doesn't forget. Not the moment. Not the feeling. Not the awakening. And even if she disappears, even if they never speak again, her energy lingers. Not as loss, but as invitation. An invitation to go inward. To explore what she unlocked. To begin a journey he didn't choose, but now can't avoid. And that's where the real story begins. The story not of her, but of him. Of a man beginning to awaken to the parts of himself he never knew existed. Of a transformation that no one else may see, but that changes everything. He doesn't understand it right away. The shift, the ache, the way she lingers in his thoughts without effort, without reason. On the surface, he's moved on. The calendar keeps turning. The days look the same. He fills his time, checks his boxes, handles his life. But inside something's missing. Or rather, something has been touched. And that touch wasn't physical. It was symbolic. It was the reflection of a part of him he never knew he wanted to see. This is where confusion sets in. Not just for him, but for her too. Because on her end, everything felt real, genuine, grounded. There was no game, no strategy, just presence. And she could feel it. He was affected, deeply. She could sense it in the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, in how still he became in her presence, like his soul paused, just to listen. But then, he pulled away. Not dramatically, not cruelly, but quietly. He became distant, unavailable. He said he was busy, or not ready, or unsure. And though his words were calm, she felt the door slowly close. And it hurt, because she wasn't asking for anything. She wasn't demanding love or promising forever. She was just being herself, open, grounded, true. And that, ironically, was what frightened him the most. Not because she was too much, but because she wasn't trying to be anything at all. She didn't fit the script. He was used to dynamics he could manage, relationships where he could play a role, where love followed rules, expectations, negotiations. But she didn't need to be chosen. She had already chosen herself. And that kind of self-possession felt foreign, uncontrollable. And in his world, things that can't be controlled are often feared. So he ran. Not because he didn't feel something, but because he felt too much. And he didn't know where to put it. It didn't fit into the compartments of his mind. It didn't follow the logic of timing or compatibility or reason. It simply was a presence that stirred his shadow. Carl Jung wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's exactly what began to happen. He told himself, it wasn't meant to be. He rationalized she was too intense, too different. He convinced himself that moving on was the right thing. But deep inside, the imprint remained. Because what she stirred in him wasn't just about connection. It was about revelation. She revealed him to himself. And that kind of encounter doesn't fade. It echoes. At night, in silence, when no one is watching. That's when she returns. Not her body, not her smile, but her presence. That feeling he had when she was near. That strange sense of home. Not in her, but in himself, when he stood beside her. That's what he misses. Even if he doesn't know how to say it, he remembers the things she said. But more than that, he remembers how he felt when she said nothing. The peace, the depth, the resonance, and now, in her absence, everything else feels noisier, louder, more performative. Nothing quite reaches the place she touched, and still he resists it. Because to admit the truth would be to admit vulnerability. It would mean acknowledging that he was moved by something he couldn't explain, something he didn't expect, something he didn't choose. But his soul chose. That's the key. The soul always knows before the mind catches up. And the soul, unlike the ego, isn't afraid of being cracked open. But here's the beautiful contradiction. While he runs outward, the real movement is happening inward. Silently, slowly, powerfully. Because an authentic encounter, even if brief, even if incomplete, marks us. It awakens something we can't put back to sleep. And that's what she did. Without trying, without knowing, she became the mirror. Not of his desires, but of his depth. Not of who he was, but of who he could become. And that's what truly scares him, not the connection, but the invitation to change, to evolve, to shed the armor, to meet himself. Because when the soul is touched, the old identity starts to crumble. He no longer finds satisfaction in what once fulfilled him. The applause feels empty. The distractions wear thin, and no matter how much he tries to recreate that feeling with someone new, it's not the same, because it was never about her. It was about what she symbolized. Freedom, authenticity, peace. She didn't just enter his life. She cracked open his unconscious. She activated the process Jung called individuation, the path toward becoming a whole, integrated self. And whether he realizes it or not, that path has begun. It might take months, years, a lifetime. But once that door opens, it doesn't close. And here's what she doesn't know. She didn't fail. She wasn't too much. She wasn't too emotional, too spiritual, too deep. She was a catalyst. And catalysts don't stay. They spark. They illuminate. They shake the ground so that the seed underneath can grow. Maybe he comes back one day. Maybe he doesn't. But what matters is that she changed him, quietly, forever. And now he must walk the path of becoming the man who doesn't run from resonance, becoming the man who no longer fears his own reflection, becoming the man who chooses love not because it's easy, but because it's real. This is the retreat before the rebirth, the silence before the reckoning, the unraveling before the integration. And it's sacred, because it means the journey has begun. Time passes, seasons shift. He tells himself he's over it, over her, over that strange, unspoken connection. He keeps busy. He distracts himself. He builds, he succeeds. From the outside, it looks like he's moved on. But inside, there's a frequency that never fades. It's not about the woman anymore. Not really. It's about the feeling. That state of being he once experienced in her presence. That calmness. That clarity. That deep, indescribable sense that for a fleeting moment, he was seen, not for what he did, or what he provided, but for who he was beneath it all. And now, in her absence, he searches, not consciously, not desperately, but something in him compares, remembers, projects. He meets others. Some kind, some beautiful, some brilliant, but something is always missing, because what he's looking for is not a woman. It's the version of himself that only existed when he was with her. And that realization stings, because now, no matter how many new faces he sees, there's a quiet part of him whispering, "This isn't it. She's not her. I don't feel the same." But here's the thing. It was never about replacing her. It was always about integrating what she activated. And until he does that inner work, no new connection will feel complete. Because what he truly misses isn't the relationship. It's the mirror she held up so effortlessly, the one that showed him his tenderness, his silence, his need to surrender, his ache to be known without explanation. At night, when the world quiets and there's nothing left to distract him, she returns. Not in a romantic fantasy, not in longing for a second chance, but as a presence, a soul echo. A reminder of what his heart is still learning to hold. Because here's the truth, he wasn't ready. Not then, not for her, not for that kind of depth. Not for the version of himself that her energy demanded. Because to stand in front of a woman who doesn't need you, but still sees you, that requires courage. Not the loud kind, but the soft inner kind. The kind that's willing to strip away performance. That dares to say, I don't know who I am beneath this armor, but I want to find out. And that's terrifying. Because no one teaches men how to navigate this. No one tells them that being deeply moved by a woman isn't weakness. That breaking open isn't failure. That love, real love, doesn't ask for answers. It asks for presence. So he ran. He closed the door. And now, months or years later, he feels the weight of that decision. Not as regret, but as recognition. Because now he's no longer who he was. The cracks have widened. The questions have deepened. And slowly he begins to understand. It wasn't love he ran from. It was himself. The part of himself that her presence revealed. The soft, the scared, the unfinished. And now that truth follows him. Not as punishment but as invitation. That's when the pull begins. The quiet desire to reach out. To reconnect. To say the words he didn't have back then. I didn't understand what I was feeling. It wasn't you. It was me meeting myself for the first time. But sometimes he holds back. Because now he wonders, is it too late? Has she moved on? Would she even want to hear from me? And deeper than that, do I really want her back? Or do I want what she represented? That's when the internal war begins. The longing versus the logic. The craving versus the clarity. And here's what often happens. He reaches out, not because he's ready to love her fully, but because he misses the feeling. And when she senses that, she knows. She may be kind, she may respond, but she won't return, not fully, because she has grown too. She knows now that what they shared wasn't ordinary. But she also knows that going back to someone who hasn't done the inner work is to betray her own transformation. She doesn't need closure. She doesn't need answers. She needed truth. And if he couldn't offer that, then she won't settle for half of it now. This is the most painful part for him. Because now finally he sees clearly. Now he knows what he lost. Not a woman, but a portal, a chance, a mirror. And it's not that he can't love again. He can, he will. But that specific frequency, that kind of resonance, it's rare. Not because she was perfect, but because she was present. Unapologetically, unshakably. She wasn't performing. She wasn't pleasing. She wasn't trying. She was simply being. And now, in a world of noise, her silence remains the loudest thing he remembers. Carl Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's exactly what she did. She showed him his darkness. Not to shame him, but to invite him in. She offered him something sacred, the chance to meet himself. And he said no. But maybe now he's ready. Ready to stop chasing the ghost of her. Ready to start becoming the man who can hold that kind of energy. Not control it. Not possess it, but meet it. Because now he understands. She wasn't the destination. She was the beginning. And if he honors that beginning, the transformation can finally take root. And so the silence becomes his companion. Not the silence of loss, but the silence of awakening. There's no longer urgency to fix, to chase, to explain. No more mental noise looping over what could have been. Now there's something else. Stillness. Because the man who once ran is now the man who pauses. He doesn't blame anymore. Not himself, not her. He's no longer caught in the loop of, why did I lose her? Instead, he asks something deeper. What did she show me about myself? This is the turning point. He's not trying to get her back. He's not fantasizing about rewriting the past. Now he's looking inward, at the parts of himself that were unearthed, exposed, left trembling in her presence. And for the first time, he doesn't turn away. He sits with the discomfort, with the tenderness, with the questions. And that act alone is revolutionary. Because most men are never taught how to hold their own vulnerability. They're taught to fix, to suppress, to move forward without looking back. But now he sees healing is not found in forgetting. It's found in remembering differently. Not remembering the woman, but remembering what he felt when he was around her, and allowing that feeling to live, not as a longing, but as a guide. He realizes something profound. She wasn't the healer. She was the mirror. And what she reflected was a version of himself he had never fully met, a man capable of stillness, of presence, of emotional depth. A man who doesn't need to be everything, just needs to be real. And this is when the soul work begins. He no longer asks, how do I win her back? Instead, he asks, how do I return to myself? Because the most powerful lesson she left wasn't in her words or her silence. It was in her departure, not as punishment, but as permission. Permission to meet his own soul, to stop outsourcing his wholeness, to stop looking for reflection in other faces, and start cultivating it within. Carl Jung said that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate, and he sees it now. How much of his life was guided by avoidance? How many decisions were shaped by the fear of being exposed, of being seen, but not anymore? Now, he chooses to be conscious, not perfect, not polished, just awake. He begins walking differently in the world, more grounded, less reactive. He listens more, speaks with intention. And though he still stumbles, he stumbles with awareness. Because now even his pain makes sense. It's not weakness, it's signal. And instead of running from it, he follows it. Back to the boy who was told to be strong, to be useful, to perform. Back to the young man who mistook admiration for love. Back to the man who learned to wear armor so well he forgot how to breathe without it. And gently, piece by piece, he removes the layers. Not all at once, but patiently, lovingly. This is the process of integration, of taking everything he once denied, his softness, his shame, his longing, and folding it into his identity. No longer separate, no longer hidden. And as he does this, something beautiful happens. He begins to love again, but differently this time. Not from lack, not from hunger, from presence. He's no longer seeking a woman to rescue him from his shadows. He's not chasing a muse to reflect his worth. Now he's able to sit across from another soul, not to get something, but to share something, to offer, not to demand, to witness, not to control. He no longer falls in love with potential. He doesn't try to become what someone else wants. Now he shows up as he is, imperfect but whole, and that changes everything. Because now love isn't about possession. It's about resonance. Now relationships aren't about safety. They're about truth. And even if she, the one who awakened all this, is never seen again, her impact lives on. Not as longing, not as a wound, but as a compass. A reminder that the most profound love doesn't always stay in our lives. Sometimes it comes to redirect them. She didn't stay because her role was never to stay. Her role was to shake the soul, to stir the unconscious, to leave behind a question so powerful he could never ignore it again. Who am I when I stop performing? That question has become his path. And on that path, he discovers something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for what he lost, but for what was activated. Because now he sees, she wasn't just a person. She was a symbol of possibility, of truth, of the man he could become. And he's becoming. Every day, he no longer chases peace. He embodies it. He no longer begs for love. He radiates it. He no longer fears intimacy. He welcomes it. Not because he found her again, but because he finally found himself. And this, perhaps, is the most sacred love story of all. The one between a man and his own soul. It began with a woman, but it ends with a return. Not to her, but to his essence, to the silence within, to the freedom of being fully, painfully, beautifully human. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And now he understands. That's what she gave him. Not romance, but a spark. Not promises, but awakening. Not forever, but beginning. And in that beginning, he found everything.